Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the Screenwriters Roundtable from Craft to Career, presented by Slamdance and Final Draft. Before I introduce our panelists, let me remind you about a couple things. Final Draft's Big Break Screenwriting Contest is now open and accepting entries. We've been helping launch careers for over 20 years. Maybe this is your year. Slamdance's screenplay competition is also open, offers over $16,000 in prizes, mentorship and feedback on every entry. They're accepting submissions for the 2020 edition through July 27th. So you have some time, but definitely enter. So on to the business at hand. Let me introduce our panelists for you. Our first panelist is the writer-director of films, including It's a Disaster, The Scenesters, and cover versions, Todd Berger. Todd, hello.
Hi, thanks for having me. Longtime listener, first-time caller. Thanks for having me today.
Our next panelist is the creator of the Netflix show Chambers, as well as the author of Love Street, Pulp Romance for Modern Women, Leah Rachel. Leah, welcome.
Hi guys, glad to be here.
And finally, her debut feature, Thunderbolt in Mine Eye, executive produced by the Duplass brothers, just premiered at this year's Slamdance Film Festival. Writer-director Sarah Sherman. Sarah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So, how's everybody doing right now? Where's everybody holed up? Sarah, you're up in Portland, correct?
Yep, I'm in Portland. Holing up is the very correct term. I'm like literally in my basement right now, so.
I'm outside, so I hope you guys don't hear birds chirping or anything, but I'm up in Laurel Canyon in Los Angeles.
I'm in the beautiful city of Pasadena, city of roses. It feels like, if you've never been there, it feels like you're in a different city than Los Angeles, even though it's 8 minutes away, but it's a whole other mindset. Yeah, my life is not very different because I just sit at this chair usually all day, every day. I just can't go to movies anymore or go anywhere.
That is a bummer. No movies is a huge bummer.
Yeah.
I'm watching more movies than ever, though.
Yeah, right?
It's true.
Yeah. Although I idiotically have just been through a disaster movie kick. Don't ask why, but I've watched every disaster movie in the past 2 weeks.
Oh,
it's very enlightening.
I'm on a virus movie kick. I watched 12 Monkeys the other night. You haven't watched that one again? Ooh.
Ooh,
that one's gonna put some things into perspective.
What I learned from all the disaster movies is just if there's a big flock of birds that suddenly flies the other direction, terrible shit's about that.
Yeah.
And I recently read that Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds is actually not as crazy as it seems. That certain birds, like crows, hold grudges. There's like scientific this.
Oh, great!
Hold a grudge against a person, and they can tell other bird friends about this grudge. So don't piss off any birds.
First, murder hornets. Now this. Great, thank you.
Yeah,
this is getting better every day.
Keep your head on a swivel. All right, let's get to some writing questions because I'm sure people are more curious about that than our theories on killer birds and hornets. Let's talk about everybody's first break. Leah, you sold a script to HBO for Mark Wahlberg to produce, right? Can you talk about that?
Yes. So I was, this is maybe 9 or 10 years, 9 years ago. And I come from an acting background and was getting very frustrated with that. And, especially early in my acting career, didn't really have the opportunity to tell my own stories and started obsessively writing and had written a script that was sort of like, it had similarities to Girls, but it was in Los Angeles. It was a very seedy, underbelly Los Angeles tale. And I was working at a restaurant here and, I met my lawyer because I would babysit for his kids. I met him in the restaurant. I'd babysit for him and his wife's kids. And he used to come home and say, "What are you writing? What are you working on?" And I told him, "Oh, I'm writing the script." And he was like, "Oh no, here's another fucking writer," or whatever. And one of his clients was looking for a female in LA story. And I passed it to him. And 3 months later, I sold it to HBO. And I had to keep my waitressing job till that deal went through for 8 staggering months. But it was very lucky.
How many scripts, so had you written many scripts prior to that, or was that really it?
I had tinkered around with a few just like narcissistic self tales about myself when I was trying to figure out and stuff, but nothing that I had ever finished. So it was the first script that I really finished, but I had been tinkering around and kind of figuring out my voice for 4 or 5 years before, for sure.
And Todd, what about you? What was your sort of first steps into
Uh,
becoming?
I went to the University of Texas in Austin, hook 'em horns. And I just did like the undergrad film program, and I took a writing class, and our final project was to write a feature. And so I just wrote it for class. And then I made a student film in class. And when I graduated, I was just delivering pizza in Austin, Double Dips Pizza. And I was going to move to Chicago and like do Second City and then move to New York, because in Austin, the film program, the attitude towards Los Angeles was like, LA, what are you going to go sell out? Because it was very Robert Rodriguez and Linklater focused in Austin. And but the University of Texas did this thing every year where they would pick an hour's worth of student films, and they would show them in Los Angeles to all the Texas alumni. And they would invite all these people to come. And so they picked my film, the short film that I had made about a robot. You can actually see it on my website. And they invited me to go. So I had graduated like a week before, and I was like, well, I've never been to LA. So I flew to LA, and I went to the screening, and afterwards an agent was there, and he walked up to me and he was like, I really liked your short. Have you ever written a feature? And I said, well, I wrote one for class. And he's like, well, could you send it to me? And I was like, sure. So I mailed it to him. This was in 2001 when you mailed scripts to people. So I mailed it to him, and I just went back to Austin, delivered pizza. And then 2 months later, he called me and was like, hey, we read your script and we want to sign you, but you have to move to Los Angeles. And I was like, okay. So I stayed in Austin delivering pizzas for 3 more months, and he sold my script to Paramount while I was delivering pizza. I was actually out on a delivery when my agent called me to tell me that I sold the script. So I went back and quit. Well, I finished my shift and then I quit, but I was like, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. You're cool. I'm out. And then I moved to Los Angeles a couple months later. And that's it.
You haven't looked back.
Never looked back. Still my agent. Well, I had to fire him because I'm in the Writers Guild, but he was my agent until a year ago.
Sarah, how about you? I mean, your first film just premiered at Slamdance. How did you get to that point?
So I grew up here in Portland, Oregon, which is where I'm at right now. I moved down to LA right after high school to pursue a career in dance, and kind of quickly fell out of that and slowly started to realize I wanted to write. That was something I had done when I was a kid and really loved, but it had, been nothing more than that. So for many, probably 6, 7, 8 years, I was just working odd jobs, dabbling in screenwriting. My brother Zach is an actor and lives in LA as well. So like we just slowly started starting to scheme about like making movies, and I was going to write them and he was going to act in them, and on and on. So there was many, many years of that. It's just funny the way it all worked out, where it honestly took me leaving LA to come up to Portland to have kids, to finally make my first movie and just kind of do it on my own. But basically, I just spent years down there, as many people do, like just everything taking a long time, trying to get people to read my stuff, trying to get people to give us money to make the stuff, and some stuff happening really, really minor, working with a production company to film a pilot of something I'd written. But it just taking years and years, and ultimately that being the pace my brother and I wanted. So we decided to make our own movie and crowdfunded, and wound up getting the Duplass brothers on board, which was not what we thought would happen. So it's been a really roundabout thing for me, for sure.
And how did you, through that period of time, how did you sort of keep yourself motivated? How did you keep yourself going?
It's funny because like now I think I have so much more, now that I'm really starting to like throw myself into writing in a almost educational way, like I'm trying to learn about structure and things that I just hadn't known about before. Now I'm starting to get all this like doubt and things, but for many years I feel like I just had like an odd confidence that like my shit's good. Something is gonna happen if I just keep doing this, because I knew I had something, and now in retrospect I'm like, I did have something. I also didn't have a lot of things, but honestly, yeah, I think it was that just sort of like excitement, I guess, of the possibility that really kept me going, because I like oddly really believed in myself. Now I'm like, oh, what am I? But so yeah.
Leah, what about you? When you're going through stuff, you're selling stuff, but it's not getting made. maybe you're getting rejected at places. How do you keep yourself kind of motivated to keep going?
I stretch in other artistic ways, because for me, if I'm too in my head about it, or if I'm just focused on writing, I go a little crazy. And I found that the slight distraction into other artistic endeavors helps me come at writing from a really fresh way and feel less sort of tethered to it, which is all just in the purpose of it helping me actually get it done. So I work in visual medium. I've directed some little music videos and art films, and I wrote an essay book with photography and stuff, but always having a side hustle that I'm under control of has really helped me, because you can be, you know, in control of your script if you're not with any producers or there's no money involved, which is wonderful. But it often, like Sarah was saying, can hit a standstill where you're hustling to get it made, hustling to get it read, hustling to get somebody to believe in you like you believe in yourself. So I found that always, you know, whether it's making short films, whether it's writing poetry, whether it's dancing, whatever it is, having something that you can have control over is great and keeps me sane.
Todd, what about you? Are you a dancer?
Yeah, no, I dance. I was dancing right before this. I'm gonna dance right after. No, I 100% agree. I always have something, like, to me, I always see like the three categories. There's the category one is like the thing I'm doing for money that I really don't care about. Like if I get fired from it and they replace me with another writer, I'm like, whatever. Like I was just doing that to make money. Great. And get health insurance. Category number two is like the big thing that I'm trying to make, you know, $1 million feature that I'm trying to attach cast to. But as we all know here, it's a game of like, oh, I'm trying to attach this actor. He's got to read it. It took him 2 months. He's attached. Then we got to get the actress, but then the actor dropped out. But this is the thing I really want to do. And then category three is like the thing I can go make for $200. And, or it's right up, like I wrote a novel one summer because I was just like, I'm in standstill of trying to get a movie made. So I'm just going to write a novel because I need to do something. And I wrote another novel last year. And like, I made a short film last night over Zoom with my friends, just because you constantly need to be putting stuff out constantly. And so I've really, over the last 15 years, I've just tried to compartmentalize the 1, 2, and 3 and make sure I've got something in all 3 avenues at all times.
That's interesting. Todd, you mentioned, you know, you had an agent, you fired your agent. I just want to talk about representation a little bit in general. Can you just talk about, you know, what it is you guys look for from your representation, both agents or managers, or, you know, your entertainment lawyer? Todd, you want to start? Just
yeah, well, I have an agent and a manager and a lawyer. Well, don't have an agent right now, but although he does rep me for directing stuff. But I mean, you know, I've always heard an agent worries about your next job, your manager worries about your career. And so an agent is there to be like, hey, they need a writer on the Care Bears movie. Are you interested? And my manager would be like, don't do the Care Bears movie, Todd. Like, do you want to be the guy? Do you want to spend a year of your life working on the Care Bears movie and then be the guy who made the Care Bears movie? And then the lawyer is just like, I don't care what you're doing. Do the Care Bears movie. And so you ideally want an agent and a manager and a lawyer who are all on the same page. But yeah, an agent really is someone that you want to just call you all the time and be like, hey, there's things floating out in the ether that need writers or directors. Are you interested? And then a manager, you're really like working on spec scripts and thinking about like, what is the next film I'm going to make? That's the next, like, a film by Todd Berger. And what is my next? Because so many spec scripts that you write are never going to get made. They're just calling cards. The purpose is to go around town, producers and executives to read it and be like, wow, that guy's got a unique, interesting voice. I should get him here for a meeting because I need a writer for the Care Bears movie. So your manager helps you kind of hone that and figure out who you are. And really, the most useful thing I find out of my manager is because I don't really pay attention to what's going on in Hollywood. Like, I don't read Variety, I don't read Hollywood Reporter. So what I love from my manager is I'm able to call him up and be like, okay, so I have an idea. It's a murder mystery over Zoom about like a pizza boy. And he's like, no, it's already in development. They're already doing that at HBO Max. I'm like, okay, cool. Because he pays attention. That's his job. And that's what I use him for.
Sarah, what about you? What's your relationship with representation?
It's pretty non-existent. Funny you should ask. Yeah, I have not had and don't have any form of representation. So Todd, I loved hearing those wise words. I will say that I'm not actively looking for representation, although like whenever it comes, I think will be a better thing than not a, you know, than not having it. But something I think a lot about is just excitement for looking for the person who will just be one step forward to helping me get things made. And maybe that's like a simple kind of naive way of looking at it, but at this point in my career, I'm a mom. I have 2 small kids. I don't live in Los Angeles. I don't necessarily want to be writing. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say that. I don't know. I'm just interested in like when it works out to make my own movies, and obviously like that takes so many things to make that happen. But I guess my point is like my goal right now is not to be like a TV writer in LA. So yeah, I just look forward to this potentially non-existent thing, but what I think of an agent or a manager as someone who potentially will help me access actors or people with more resources. And even if that's in such a minute way, it will be more helpful than me in my basement right now, you know? So, that's my non-take.
I think it's a good take. Leah, what's your relationship with your representation, and have they had it, you know, a meaningful impact on your career?
Yes, I mean, strangely, I have a weird, like my lawyer, I'm closer to than anyone because I knew him from the beginning and because he believed in me before anyone else did, which is really random. And I could kind of consider him part of my management team too, just because of our history. So he's been really a huge part of my career, possibly the biggest of everyone on my team. I don't have an agent right now. I just have a management team. And I think the biggest thing that sometimes people can misunderstand about management is that you should get a manager and an agent when you're ready to run your career. Never go in like, so what do I do? You know, or like, where should my career go? Because they will blast you with stuff and 85, 90% of it is shit. So it can be very easy to want to do things when opportunities are coming your way, but having a group of protectors around you that are extensions of yourself that can sort of field some of those things, I think is really important. And with my managers, I had just actually switched management companies this year. And when I was meeting with new managers, I went in and I kind of tested managers. I just went in and I said, I'm not going to make you money for at least a year, because I'm Sarah, I'm very inspired by your story and stuff. That I'd done a big show last year, and after that was like, I want to make my fucking movie. Like, I'm going to write a movie, I'm going to make it, it's going to be tiny, I'm going to make no money. So there was a few managers that when I said that, I saw them sort of like, oh God, you know, but I went with the people that were like, awesome, we don't care, you know? So I think just being really upfront with what you want to do and you being able to control your career is important, because you're the holder of it. You know, you're going to go through different agents and managers and lawyers and stuff your whole career, possibly being, you know, with people for a longer time than others, but never rely on them to make your path.
And you said something that I want to just drill down on a little bit. What do you think you know, what is trying to get an agent or a manager? What's too early? What should you have ready? What should you be prepared for when you're going in for to finally get that representation?
For me, my story I might not be the best person to ask this question to, because I'm a big believer in build the ship and they will come. So I think, you know, if you get in a situation where you're trying to, you know, hustling so hard to get an agent, you know, spend all that energy writing the fucking script that's going to make it undeniable, you know, or make your short film, or, you know, put it into an artistic endeavor, and you're going to attract the person who you want on your team anyway. It's not to say not to, you know, hustle and stuff, but I would put more energy into what you're creating than trying to get representation, because you'll draw the person who you want on your team, because they're going to love what you're doing in a pure artistic format.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and my answer to that would be, I always tell young or up and coming writers, have like 2 or 3 scripts. Don't just have one script, because a lot of writers I know have been working on one script for 10 years and that's all they have. And the thing about being a professional writer is your agent wants to make sure if I put you up for a job and you get hired on that job, you're going to have 8 weeks, 12 weeks to write the script. So they want to make sure you can actually write in a normal human amount of time, like per the rules. And then also, if you write one script, I've found so many people will give a script to an agent and the agent will be like, cool, so this is like a psychological thriller. I'm not really into that. What else do you have? And you want to be able to say, well, oh, I also have this other one that's more of a mystery. And I also have this romantic comedy. Those are like the 3 things I'm interested in, and I've written one of each. So would you like to read all 3? And it shows you're versatile, and it shows that you know how to do multiple things. So don't just, and also, no, you don't need a script to be 100% perfect. Like everyone's going to want to change it anyway, right? So just get it to where you want it to be and that you like it, and then move on to another one and have a couple good samples. That's if that makes sense.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I hear that from a lot of writers. You know, you're going for a general because someone's read a spec, and what else you got is the first question, and you better have a good answer to that.
Always the first question. Every general meeting you go on, someone read your spec, you go in, and they're like, loved your script. It's not for us, but what else do you have? And when you're in that meeting, you better have a really good answer. Because if your answer is, oh, I don't know, I've been kicking around some ideas, you should be like, oh, I have my other.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Let's talk about craft a little bit. Sarah, for you, you know, what's the first thing that usually like sparks an idea for you? Is there, or is it something different every time?
Yeah, it's super different every time. Right now, I'm just starting to kind of like toy with ideas for this new project that is really stemming from like a playlist that I'm making, which I never really thought would be an inspiration that would like form characters and stuff. But it started with one song and then another song, and I'm finding like there's a movie in this for me, and so it really varies. I think a lot of writers are observers. And so for me, it comes from watching people and watching circumstances and being fascinated by the way people do things. Character is what always comes first for me. Like just a person I'm noticing in life who has a strange or different way of doing something will become really fascinating to me. And you know, it'll start molding itself into a character. And the hardest thing for me, I think, is like making a story. Like I could make like in-depth characters for days, but then it's like, oh, they have to do stuff and things need to happen. And that's, I'm sort of like, can somebody else like do that part and I'll just like make these people come to life, you know, which isn't how it works. But yeah, so for me, I think observation and just like human study and characters is where things start for me.
What about you, Todd? What's how do you usually get your first crack at something? What usually the first thing that hits you?
I have like a big notes on the notes app or whatever of just ideas, and like I'll always just like ideas will just come out of nowhere. I'll be out there in the world and I'll see a kid at Chuck E. Cheese like stealing coins, and I'm like, what about Ocean's 11 but at Chuck E. Cheese? It's like 11 kids, and I'll just write that down on this big idea list. And then when it's actually time to hunker down and start working on a script, I just look at this long list of ideas, half of which are half-baked. And I just think, which one of these is exciting? Which one of these would I want to read or see as a movie? Like if I saw all of like, oh, these are the movies coming out this summer, and these were the 10, which one is the most exciting to me that I would want to go see? And then that's the one. And that's when I call my manager and I say, hey, are there any kid Ocean's 11 movies? And he's like, oh yeah, there's 3. I'm like, okay, cool. What else? And so it all kind of comes from there. I just think about like what makes me excited that I would want to actually watch, because why else are we doing this if we're not creating stuff what we want to watch, right?
Leah, you agree?
Yes, I agree. I usually, my test with ideas or things that are forming is if they don't leave me. Like if I I'll get really inspired by just images or things that will haunt me. Like this whole script that I've been working on for a year came because I saw a picture of a mutated flower, like a flower that had mutated and the center was longer, and it was the scariest image I've ever seen, and I didn't know why, and I started analyzing it, and it was like, oh, the fact that nature can change on you and we just trust it is so scary. And it wouldn't leave my head, and I started dreaming about this flower, and then flowers freaked me out for a while, and then I started noticing flower delivery vans in the hills where I am, and I was like, ooh, what if there's like a mystery with a florist and mutating flowers, and then I hear Dolly Parton's song Wildflowers, and that becomes a part of it, and all kind of, I will get pregnant with the idea so much, and everything that I'm seeing will kind of flow into it, and then I start vomiting the actual any form of fucking story. Sarah, I'm with you. I hate the story part. I hate it. So it's usually just wisps from my day, and if they all start to funnel into one thing, then that's a thing that's worth, I think, exploring and trying to make exciting to other people as well. So yeah.
Sarah, you talked about character being like, you know, sort of the thing that is big for you. What's your approach to writing character?
Kind of similar to, oh, did
Sorry.
you?
I was saying, do you write detailed backstories, that kind of stuff?
Not religiously, but when that happens, I'm, you know, kind of interested, and I'll go there. But kind of like Todd said, for me, it's the Notes app, it's files all over my computer of various, it's just kind of slowly building on these people. Yeah, backstories, I often find too that like they really change for me. Like if I start one too early, it'll just wind up being false, which is okay, because it will eventually, you know, lead to something else. But like I'm working on something right now that I recently found this old Google Doc, and I thought I had written all these in-depth backstories for this whole family, and I'm reading it now, just like it was such a surface depiction of a backstory that like was very like writerly and sort of like, oh, they come from this church and on, and it wasn't really scraping the surface of like the humanity. So for me, it's often something, I mean, it's different every time, but I really have to let a lot kind of simmer, you know, and sometimes that looks like a week, sometimes it's a few months, but they're not ready to kind of be real people until, I don't know, until I can get past like the details of you know, what makes this person or whatever. And yeah.
Todd, what about you? When you're, you know, first creating characters, what do you, what's your process?
Yeah, I used to just really focus on the plot first and then plug the characters in as needed. And then when I started directing, I realized that actors really think about the characters a lot more than you even do. And they have their own thoughts and opinions, apparently. And so I would find when you would meet with actors about characters, they would really want to know, like, who is this character? What's their story? How do they feel about this? And then I was like, oh, I should probably think about these things actually when I'm working on the script, so that I can flesh out the character more. And then when I'm inevitably asked these questions by actors, I have an answer. So I do like to just kind of sit back. I mean, I don't do it for every character. If they're in one scene as like the owner of the flower store, I don't think about like, well, but where are they? Where did this love of flowers come from? But for the main characters and their relationships, I like to sit back and kind of think through like their perspective and where they're from, just in case, especially because if you're doing it as a job with producers or executives or whoever, and you get into a meeting, oftentimes they will ask you questions about a character and they want an answer like in the meeting right now. It's not something for you to go think about. So if they're like, well, what is Debbie's motivation for going to the carnival? You can't be like, you better be able to answer like right away. And you should know, because otherwise you look like you haven't thought about it. So that's a good idea.
But it sounds like you also want to stay flexible on some of those details because of, you know, actors and other people that you might collaborate.
Exactly. Oh yeah. Because there are some actors who are like, I don't want to know where they're from. I'm gonna decide. And you're like, cool, you do you.
Mhm. Leah, what about you? When you're approaching characters, when you're coming up with new characters, what's your process like?
I usually start with somebody real or a merger of a few real people, either in my life or just the guy I see walking every morning. And I'll start with just either something physical or a trait of someone that I know or somebody that I went to middle school with and haven't seen in 12 years. And I'll kind of build upon that because it helps me to have something real first, just so that psychologically I feel like it's a real living person and what I'm doing isn't just me making it up, and then I can make it up after that. But I'll often, I don't really write out the backstories, but I just found, and this is totally just because it makes the writing easier, but I'll sometimes go through like, you know, that thing that was a couple years ago, it was like the 30 questions to make people fall in love or whatever, that makes people fall in love very quickly. I do that for my characters sometimes, just because they're really existential, deep questions and stuff. And it just makes, when you're writing and you have so much behind a character and you know what their, you know, high school experience was like and everything, it makes the writing a shitload easier. Like a lot easier. And it also gives you the confidence when you're writing it. Cause I know I've gotten in situations when I'm writing a character that isn't fleshed out. And in my head, I'm just like, bullshit. You don't know what you're saying. You don't know who this character is. And when I'm writing a character that I've really thought about deeply, I feel way more confident writing that character. And it's how I think, Todd, even what you were saying about actors and stuff, you know, the way that I love actors and I love their process. And I think that, and probably because I come from an acting background before this, thinking, you know, what I think a lot of times creates an amazing performance is whether it's their secret or not, it's them knowing everything about their character. So, you know, tics or things that are going to trigger them, nuances that come from their backstory is what makes a performance really dynamic. And I think it's what makes characters super dynamic too. So approaching it like that really helps me, and it just helps hush the voice that's like, liar, liar, liar. So that's always helpful.
Sarah, I see you nodding your head over there. So for you, is it like a gut thing? Can you just tell like this isn't right for this character? Or, you know, when you're writing, how do you hone down into what feels right?
I was just thinking like physicality is a really big thing for me that really helps. If I can attach a set of physical movements, or if I can understand how this person sits, how they lay on a bed, how they walk, immediately like more than half of my job is done somehow. And kind of like Leah, everything just sort of flows from there in terms of it feels authentic to me and dialogue comes out. So, you know, I've never like started from a sort of intentionally like, okay, what's the physicality gonna be for this character or whatever, but to me that's kind of, I don't know, just something that that naturally starts to form pretty early on, and I guess help it take shape. So I'm not sure I would like recommend like find the way they shrug their shoulders. It's crucial because I don't know if it is for somebody else. I'm just thinking and sharing that I'm realizing in this moment how that's been oddly a really big thing for me in forming characters.
I see Todd laughing over there a little bit. Todd, is that a big part of your process?
Well, you know, also as a dancer, I just think about that a lot.
Yeah.
No, that is great. I was going to say one fun little exercise I'll do sometimes is I'll take a scene, because sometimes you get concerned that all the characters kind of sound alike and they all kind of just sound like you. So I will take a scene between two people and I'll switch the character names. And like if you have Tom and Jerry, and if you switch Tom and Jerry's names and you still buy the scene, you're like, well, those characters aren't different enough. Like, I'm not doing my job. It should feel uncomfortable if I switch Tom and Jerry, because I'm like, well, Jerry wouldn't say that. Tom would never act like that. Then, you know, you've done your job and you're differentiating these characters. So that's a fun little tip for you guys if you're ever stuck.
Practical piece of advice. I want to talk about the relationship, if there is one, and if you think there is one, between theme and characters, and where that comes in, when that comes into the process for you. Sarah, what's the connection between those two things, and at what point do you really start to play with it, if you do at all?
I gotta say, like, I don't think about theme a whole lot. Um, it's been the past year I've been thinking, should I be thinking about theme more? And funny enough, the thing I'm working on right now is like super theme heavy, but it really didn't come out until the end. I'm fascinated by writers who their process is to like sit down. Like I was just listening to a podcast the other day where I don't remember who was saying like, I cannot start a word before I know my theme. And I was like blown over by that because I literally like write films. I even made one and like, I'm like, yeah, what is the theme, you know? And like, it may fully be to its detriment and I just don't know that, or I'm not looking hard enough. I want to say that it can and almost should depend on what the piece is. I mean, geez, now that I'm saying that, I'm like, no, you should have a fucking theme. You should like, no, you should know what you're saying. But I guess the word theme is almost like, it like causes a reaction in me where it feels so academic.
Sure.
And that's not my background, that it can feel, I could easily see myself getting really hung up on that and the writing not coming because I'm like, what is the theme? And that's just not helpful for me and the human I am, but other people are different. So I think knowing, like if I could strip the word away and just know that it's important, it's not even important, it's crucial to know what I'm trying to say. And even if that's just to say like, this is a story about love, you know, then you're doing your job. But yeah, I guess I'm just revealing in this moment to myself and to you all that the word theme causes a reaction in me. So it's different for me every time, you know. Like I said, some things are very like overtly theme heavy and other things like don't have a theme. That's my theme. Goodbye.
Leah, what about you? How does theme play into your process? Is this something
I totally understand, Sarah. The word theme triggers me too. A lot of sometimes writing terms will trigger me because my natural response, this is probably a psychological issue, is to be like, well, then I'm not fucking doing it. Right. So like there's what I erase the word theme, but I'll just think, what's the soul of the story? Like what is like underneath everything? And if it is like, okay, so whatever that flower project that I'm talking about, it's about like something you inherently trust sort of turning on you, you know, that there's, what does that feel like? And I think that I won't go in with a theme like this has to breathe in every scene, because then I think you're sort of shackling yourself in a way where if you kind of start with, oh, this is something that's like, this is something that's tickling my soul and infecting my sleep a little bit. This is interesting. Okay, cool. Let me explore that. But then by the time you get to the end of the script, your theme or whatever might have mutated itself and be something different. And I think that you should be very open to that changing. And I think that sometimes where people can get in trouble is that their characters also know the theme of the movie. Yeah. And sometimes, you know, I've heard there's sometimes the note of, well, can somebody just say the theme? And I'm like, well, if they knew the theme, they wouldn't need the movie to figure it out. So I think that there's, to me, theme, soul of the story, whatever it is, it's invisible. And it could be very different for different people watching the movie and experiencing it. And I think it should be. So I'm loose with it, but it's definitely a thing, but it's not called a theme. So yes, right. I understand.
Let's stop using that word. Todd, what is your approach to the word that shall not be
I love
said?
themes. I love TV themes. No, I try to write I often write comedy, and when I try to write satire, which is a 4-letter word in Hollywood, but I usually start with like, okay, what am I trying to say? But I don't expressly want that to be spelled out. I want you to be in the car on the way home from the theater and be like, oh, was that about colonialism? Like, I get it now. So I try to think of like, what is my larger thing that I'm trying to say with this? Or is it just like supposed to be like a dumb comedy that's not about anything? Which, by the way, that's fine. There are a lot of movies that are about nothing, which is fine. But if you're trying to say something, you don't necessarily have to spell it out. But for as an example, so I made a movie called It's a Disaster that's on Hulu. That's about 8 people stuck in a house together during what seems to be a terrorist attack, right? And it's 8 people and they're all stuck inside. And so I knew what I wanted to say with the movie. And when I was writing the script, I was like, well, I have 8 characters. How do I differentiate them? I get it. I'm going to base each one of the characters on a stage of grief, of like how we deal with something terrible. So there's like denial, hope, grieving, acceptance, shock. And I wrote each of the characters with this in mind of like, well, how would they react to this happening? And then when I met with the actors, I was like, okay, just so you know, your character represents hope. And some of the actors were like, oh, cool. And then some of the actors were like, cool story, bro. Like, I'll do what I do. And then you shoot the movie, and like Leah was saying, it organically changes. And then things happen and people bring perspectives because you're not making a movie by yourself. And by the time the movie was done and we were doing press for it, a reporter would ask one of the actors, like, well, we heard in an interview that Todd said everyone was based on a stage of grief. Which one were you? And actors were like, I don't remember. I don't really remember. I think I was hope. And so what you may think is some important theme might end up mattering. And a lot of people will see the movie and misinterpret it anyway. So like, don't freak out about it.
And do you think there's Sarah, do you think there's a danger in, or some sort of risk in, you know, putting theme, you know, going in with the theme in mind versus kind of letting it sort of come organically as you're writing a story? Is that, you know, is that something you're conscious of when you're tackling a story?
I don't think there's a danger to it. If you are also finding life in your characters, and finding life in general in the story. I've never gone down this route, but I can imagine myself, quote unquote, shackling myself to a theme in the beginning, saying like, this is going to be about, I don't know, I can't think of a theme right now. And that just kind of hindering my process. I don't think it has to, though. I don't think it is a danger. In fact, I think it's wise, but I think maybe between the 3 of us, what we're saying is kind of surrendering to the process, surrendering to the inevitability that it will likely change and mutate and become something else. I have definitely experienced a sort of like, you know, now this is great, by the way, because I'm like just really, I'm sounding all these things out loud and just realizing a lot of things for myself right now. But for myself, I'm realizing like when I go in, when I have gone in being like, I want to, this is a commentary on this social issue and like, here we go. I feel like the feedback I get from my like very kind and thoughtful friends on like the first or second draft of the script is like, you are choking us with that commentary, you know. That's not to say that all people would do that, but I do think that having just flexibility and openness, whether you intentionally want to go in with this theme, with this deliberate point you're trying to make, or whether you want to kind of loosely know it and let it sort of marinate. I think whatever it is, just being really open and mindful to the fact that, like Leah said, it's got to be invisible and it maybe will and should change a bit in order to adapt to these characters and circumstance that you don't actually know yet. You know, they haven't seen it out yet. And so I think having that in stone from the beginning maybe is a danger, but going in with it, knowing it's going to morph, I think is good.
Let's talk about something a little bit more practical, less theoretical. Leah, okay, you've got your idea, you know the character, you've got your, you know the story you're writing. What's your writing day like?
Oh God. It ain't pretty. It's very, so if I'm writing a spec, like if I'm not in a room, or if I'm not, sometimes if I'm on a deadline, it's still the same, but I really like the early morning hours. Because I know a lot of people will like late at night. I think there's something just to being close to sleep that feels a little childlike, and you're still a little sleepy, and you're not as hard on, I'm not as hard on myself in the morning, because I feel like people aren't up yet. I can get away with things. Nobody's calling me. This isn't real. It just helps me. So my most productive hours are probably like 6 in the morning until 9 o'clock. And then I'm going to be totally honest. Sometimes I'm shot for the day. And I know that seems crazy, but I really will work for those, 2 or 3 hours. I'll work very intensely. And then the rest of the day, I'll, just because I'm not in front of my computer typing, I go on lots of long walks, and I have the phone and I'll take notes, I'll get ideas, and so I'll make myself full the whole day so that the next morning I can wake up and vomit out what I've become full with from the day. So I'm very unproductive from the hours of 12 to 5. Nothing's ever really going to happen there unless it has to happen, which can, but the work isn't usually as great. So I like to write in the morning, gather inspiration during the day, wake up right in the morning so that I feel hungry when I'm writing. Because I mean, we all know that feeling, but when you're sitting in front of the computer trying to pound out and you just feel dead inside, nothing's worse. So it's a constant search to not feel dead inside when I'm in front of the computer. That's sort of
I see you vigorously agreeing over there.
I 100% agree with what you said, just because, especially I have a child like you, Sarah, and like to me, the biggest enemy of productivity is distraction when you're trying to write. And I always refer to the zone. Like my wife, I'm always like, I'm in the zone right now. And so I will set my alarm. If I'm like into a script or working on a novel or something, I set my alarm for 5 in the morning, and I get up and I drink coffee and I'll write for 3.5, 4 hours straight until my child wakes up and then wants cereal. And then I'll go walk the dogs and blah, blah. And sometimes I might be done. I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm done now. I'm out of the zone. I've been removed from the zone, airlifted out, and there's no way I'm getting back in today. So like you said, I always make a playlist for every project I'm working on. So like right now I'm working on this Halloween set family movie. So I went and made a playlist of like scores from other movies that I could potentially see, or like spooky songs, like Thriller, and I put them on a playlist. And I don't listen to them while I'm writing because I like to write in silence. But when I go, I'll go for an hour and a half walk around my neighborhood, listening to that soundtrack, thinking about the script, thinking about the thing I'm going to work on tomorrow when I wake up at 5 in the morning. So I'm like, well, what's the next scene? Okay, so what's going to happen in that scene? Okay, cool. And now I'm ready tomorrow. But I ain't writing the rest of the day. You kidding? I'm done.
Sarah, so you're a morning person as well?
Yeah, in theory. I mean, I'm forced to be by circumstance. I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, so it's just like, pretty hellish all moments of my life. But I have learned that morning are the hours in which I think I thrive best as a writer. It's honestly really, really hard being a parent, even being a parent with a lot of luxuries, like a supportive partner and on and on. It's tough getting those hours in the morning. I have to like really commit to, like, I'm gonna wake up at 4 a.m. before the kids and maybe get 2 hours in. And when I commit to it, like when I really want to finish something, it works. I resent it a lot, but it works. And so that's how it is. But in terms of the process in other ways, because I do have such time constraints in my life, more than I ever could have imagined, using other ways throughout the day in which to get the work done, such as you both mentioned, like walking and just movement in general, is a really positive space for me to be cultivating like serious work on a project, even though I'm not at the computer. And journaling is also an enormous part of my process. When I'm like really on point in life, I'm waking up every morning before my children and I'm journaling 3 pages every morning on like forcing the 3 pages, even 4 or 5 pages, to get all the junk out of my head, in order to lay the grounds for like possible inspiration and creativity. I love that space once I've just like journaled all the bullshit for 45 minutes and then things start coming to me. But I have I don't know how other brains work, but my brain is like very like jibber jabbery and like just like a lot of stuff going on all the time. So it's really helpful for me to literally put it on paper so I don't have to think about it the rest of the day. And then there's just this like beautiful open space. So that's something that like even while I'm taking care of my kids, I can kind of do. Like my 2-year-old the other day, literally I was like probably about to have a meltdown and my 2-year-old walked over and handed me my journal. And I'm just like, you know that is something that like helps me kind of orient myself, I guess. And then half the time, when I'm like in something, the journaling will be about the work, which is really awesome. And then you know, I'm like writing scenes in there, I'm writing scenes in my head, and it kind of comes organically from that.
So you've got scenes in your head, you've got scenes in your journal. Are you a big outliner, or do you have, you know, a really solid outline before you're writing a script, or you kind of just, you know, winging it to a certain degree?
I've done it both ways. I mean, I think every time I've wound up with some sort of an outline, but I've kind of run the spectrum, and I'm not sure what like my way is going to be yet, or if it'll always kind of change. The scenes really are what like start to kind of like spill out of me, and those are the things that I know to like catch no matter what. Like even if I'm like with my kids in the grocery store, it's like I got to get this down because like this is going to be in the script. And so I try to hold that stuff and let the outlines kind of form from that. But I don't know about you guys, but for me it really is kind of different every time. Sometimes the outline feels like the more detailed, the more helpful it was, and other times having a really loose outline actually opened up a lot of space for in the moment decisions.
Todd, what about you? Are you a big outliner?
Oh, I'm a big outliner. I'm very well, first, like I discovered quickly upon like once I started working as a writer is that you will be like, if you get hired on a job, you will be outlining. Like before they tell you to just, hey, here's a bunch of money, go write a script, they're like, we'd like a 15-page treatment of what's going to happen in every goddamn scene of the movie. And you're like, okay. So once I started getting used to that, I realized, well, that's the hard part, is like figuring out the outline. And once that's done, like writing the script's easy. I can crank that out. So I got so used to that, knowing that half the time I write, I'm going to have to write it anyway, because it's part of my job, that I just do it now for myself. Even if I'm just writing a spec script, I write a 15-page outline that in theory I could hand to anyone and they would be able to read it and know what's going to happen in the movie. Both thematically and character-wise and everything. And then I just put that over there and I'm like, okay, now it's time to start writing the script. I already know what's gonna happen. Now comes the easy part. The fun part is actually writing the screenplay to me.
What about you, Leah?
Okay, so I'm more reformed. I used to be very like, fuck outlines, I'm just doing what comes to my head. And that was all fun and games until I started writing mysteries. So the past few projects that I've written, I keep saying I'm not going to write a mystery again, but I keep being drawn to these to plots that involve like very carefully thread mysteries, and it would really beat my ass in that way, where I'd get through a draft and I'd be like, okay, but this one part I want to change, and then to change that it would Jenga tower the whole thing, and it became a big at least when your story, if it has any type of Jenga tower mentality to it, I think doing a bullet points, again, this is, if I'm working on something without a studio or network involved, I'll really do kind of a bullet point outline, more of a plot outline than a character outline, because I like to kind of go with the characters where they go throughout the scenes. But it genuinely started affording me a freedom when I was writing, where like I wouldn't, get in the situation where I had to do a page 1 rewrite 8 times just because I wanted them to go to the store and not the graveyard. You know what I mean? Like these things started really hindering me. And, like Todd was saying though, when, if it's a work for hire project, or, you had to produce 10 episodes of television last year, you're doing a beat sheet, you're doing an outline, you're doing a first draft, like they want to see for an hour-long script, our outlines were, 18 to 20 pages. So they're going to want to know the whole story before. And I found for me, it was really hard for me at first, because I felt I had an attitude, self-admittedly, that the magic was being taken out by doing that. And what I realized is that if you let surprises happening when you're writing and stuff, that for me personally, really focusing on the plot moves in the outlines helped me have fun during the script and made the writing feel actually so much more free in a way, and has kept me specifically from having to go back and do page 1 rewrites when I could have just fucking spent a week doing an outline on that mystery plot. So it's afforded me freedom.
And what about, you've mentioned having to do rewrites because you've changed your mind, but let's just talk about rewriting in general. So you've got a draft of something, you've vomited it out. What's the next step for you?
For me, I love rewriting because it's just so nice to birth the first baby, you know, and then you can constantly go back and tweak it and stuff. I like to, usually the first draft process for me is the daydream process that I was talking about earlier, of walking around, oh, you're just thinking of things and it's amazing. That's great because everything's projection. And then you sit down to write it and you're like, well, what the fuck? It seems so much cooler in my head. This is crazy. And then I like to make it fun again. So then I'll take the baby, and I like to either go on some sort of, well, not now, but some sort of weekend trip, or like I'll take it with me to the beach. I'm in LA. I'll take it with me to the beach for a week, and I print it out, and I do a lot of rewriting just by hand a lot. So I print it out, have the baby, I bring it to the park, I bring it to bars, you know, I like to make it fun and dreamy again. I'll go through and pen it up like crazy. And then, because I like thinking when I'm away from the computer, and then I'll come back to the computer with the torn up script and, you know, start going back into final draft and tinkering with it. But I like getting away from the computer for a while. And then I do that as many times until I feel comfortable sharing it with somebody, which could be anywhere from 2 to 487. I don't know.
Sarah, what's your approach to rewriting?
Oh, gosh, I'm deep in that right now.
Sorry, I didn't mean to trigger you.
Yeah, it's so hard. I guess I'm just going to be the voice saying it's tough. I struggle with rewrites, and I'm also learning how deeply important and necessary they are. But it is still hard. I think it's tough for me because I get, you know, I finish the script and like these characters have come to life, and it can be hard for me to detach what happens in the scene from like this character living and demonstrating it, their reality, I guess. So I finish a script. My brother's always the first person who reads what I write, and then I send it around to friends, and I have a very thoughtful and intelligent group of friends who are always willing to devote a lot of time to giving me notes. They always make it better. I still always resist the notes at first, and then once I start, it's okay, you know, I mean, where I'm at in my career, I'm not writing for HBO or anything like that. And so, you know, I get to, I guess, kind of pick and choose what feedback feels really amazing, and or, you know, what notes feel extremely accurate and on point, and other ones that I'm like, I think this is really crucial to this character and I'm going to keep it. So I just do several rounds of that. I really like grit my way through every rewrite, saying I never want to do this again, and then the next draft is always so much better, and I like have this whole process with it. So I still like live in that space of just like resistance, like pain, and then kind of like, okay, that was actually like a really important process. And so anyways, I'm like deep in that right now, but it's exciting hearing people who are like, I love rewrites, because it's nice to know that's possible. And like, I don't know, I look forward to like a few years from now and like saying, I love rewrites, you know?
Yeah, it sounds like it's kind of an emotional journey for you right now.
The whole thing.
Todd, what about you? What's your approach to rewrites? How crucial are they to your process?
I love rewrites, guys. I love them. No, but I'll finish the script, and then I will just not get away from the computer for a while. I will just get away from the script for a while. I was like, I'm sick of this now. For the next week, I ain't looking at this thing. And instead, I'm just going to like watch movies a lot, or maybe hopefully in the similar genre, because someone once said the best time to come up with ideas for your movie is when you're watching another movie, especially a bad one, because then you're like, well, I would have done this differently. And I find, especially unfortunately, going to the movie theater when you're completely free of any distractions and sitting there, my mind would always tend to wander and start thinking about my own script. And then I would pick up the script again and start rewriting it. And I like to purposefully way overwrite the first draft. Like, I want it so fucking long that, like, I just finished the first draft of this family Halloween movie that it was 173 pages, which is insane. Like, the movie's gonna end up being
Halloween movies.
Yeah. So, but it then forces me to go in and really think about like what really needs to be in the script, like what really needs to be here, what's really important. So I'm just like vomiting writing the first draft as anything that comes into my head. And then when you start rewriting it, to me, rewriting is about shortening the thing. And by shortening it, you're really focusing on what matters. And that's kind of like my philosophy for it.
Sarah had mentioned, after finishing a draft, sending it out to, trusted friends and colleagues for feedback. Todd, what about you? How is that crucial to your process? And who are those people in your life that you trust for feedback?
Yeah, I have a brain trust of like a couple people, not only for feedback, but for typos. Like you never want to give the script to like someone who is paying you, especially, or someone like you're trying to show off and then stuff is misspelled or there's bad grammar. So like, so yeah, I have like 2 or 3 friends that I'll show the script to. And you have to be, you can't be precious with your script and you have to listen to people's feedback. And my philosophy is if one person says something that you don't agree with, okay, understand context. But if everyone is saying it, then they're probably right. Like if all 3 people are like, yeah, I was confused or I didn't get this, then they're right and you're wrong. So like, shut up and deal with it. And then the next step is I would give it to my agent, my manager, who are going to look at it more from the like perspective of how the producers or financing people are going to look at it, and because my friends are going to have like the artsy perspective and then my manager and agent are going to have like this other perspective on it. So it's good to get varying opinions and not just people who are exactly like you.
And Leah, what about you? Once you finish something, who's reading it? What are you looking for from them?
I give it to my mom and she loves everything. No, I really do. Everything I write, I don't even know if she even knows how to read it the right way, but she calls, oh, this is the best thing you've ever done. Okay, no matter what. It could be like Roast Beef Sandwich, the movie, and she'd be like, oh, it's so beautiful. So I give it to my mom so I can feel good. And then I have a writing partner that I write with a lot. So if it's something I'm writing, I'll give it to him and he'll be super brutal and he's my most trusted person. I give it to my brother. He works kind of in the industry. I have an uncle that lives in Cleveland that's just really artistic and weird. And I like getting different points of view from it. And I think a lot of what I'll write will tend to be polarizing. So, if a lot of people, I tend not to listen to the prescription for how to fix things, but just like where are people saying, I don't know, something, and when their jump to fix it might be feel like very obvious, but you don't have to do that. It's just, if you're reading something and all of a sudden a bunch of people are being like, the melody feels weird here, pay attention to that and dig. And I try to figure out my own way to do it. But I'm also very careful of not giving my shit to too many people because that can make you get in your head a bit. And, you're giving it to people and asking for feedback. So people are going to have it. And you don't know how spicy they're going to come in with their notes and stuff. So I would just say, for me, at least, I have a trusted probably 4 people that I give it to. And sometimes if it's if it's less visual project and more naturalistic, I sometimes just have people over and I get them drunk and buy them pizza and we read it out loud because I like to hear it out loud. And I get them drunk enough that by the end they think it's great. So.
Sarah, just to bring it back to you, when you're getting these notes from people, and I think Leah maybe touched on this a little bit, sometimes I think there's probably a note behind the note where someone's bumping on something and they're maybe saying, I think you should do this, or I think this is wrong, but you look at it and you're like, well, I disagree, but there might be something here because multiple people are bumping on this. Is there something to that when you're spreading it, when you're sharing your stuff with people?
Yeah, for sure. I love however you worded it, of like the prescription, I think focusing on the areas that come up and not necessarily on how to fix it is really helpful. It's going to ensure that that it's you that comes through still, and that your intentions, I think, kind of follow through still. I wholly agree on a separate note of just keeping the circle of people you send it to really trusted and really small, because like when I wrote my first screenplay years ago, I sent it to someone who just tore it apart. And that it took me like a year to be like, I think I'm still going to be a writer, even though, it can be really hard depending, and I would just recommend that for anyone starting out. know who you're sending it to, I guess. But yes, I do think focusing just on the areas, keeping notes of that. For me, just in general, I feel like a theme for me is like letting things simmer. So knowing that there's this kind of problem area, but not necessarily being like, I must fix that today. Letting it kind of come to me organically is really where I wind up making the best choices, I think.
One other thing to throw in about getting feedback from people is a lot of people don't think about this, but try to give the script to people who don't know what it's about. Like, because a lot of writers don't shut up about their script and they're telling their friends about it. And they're like, and like my wife knows what I'm working on. She knows every beat of it because I talk about it all the time. So if I then give it to her, like she knows what's already in the script before she reads it. So in journalism, it's called like red teaming or something. Like try to keep certain people completely in the dark about what you're working on. And if they ask you, if you're at a bar or on a Zoom cocktail hour, just be like, what's that script about? You're like, I'm not going to tell you because I want you to read it. And I don't want you to know what happens in it. Because most people who ever read the script won't know what it's in it or what it's about. And so you need to keep people in the dark so you get accurate like notes, basically.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Got a few more questions. We're getting close to the end here, but I got a few more questions I definitely want to get in. And I think something that is actually probably more relevant now than ever, and Sarah, I want you to talk about this first. How crucial is it to be in a Los Angeles or New York if you want to have, a successful career as a writer? I mean, you're in Portland right now. Just talk about, the pluses and minuses of being there and what you think about that.
The pluses of being here are that I get to have the life I want, where I want, and my life isn't dictated by industry, I guess. I'm also near to family. I love my city, on and on. The detriments, I think, are probably kind of obvious in that, like, you can't just hop over to the other side of town for a meeting if that meeting takes place in LA, which of course it's going to, or generally. So that's difficult, but honestly, that hasn't impacted me too negatively thus far. I mean, I'll share a little bit just to kind of give other people, hopefully, like, hope that you don't necessarily have to live in LA. Like, I moved back here, had kids, had a family. Me and my brother, who was in LA, decided kind of like over the phone, like, we're so sick of years going by and stuff not happening for us. Like, let's make this feature. I wrote it. We decided to crowdfund. We got a loan for the other half. We made it up here. And then after making it, the Duplass brothers came on board. But my point is, like, we were like, it just doesn't matter. We're going to, like, make it at home for super cheap. We just, like, have to do it. And it, we didn't have to be in LA for that. And I think a lot about how if I hadn't been living here, if we hadn't, I don't know, my specific journey was that, like, years were just passing in LA working, like, dead-end jobs. Okay, maybe not dead-end, but working jobs that weren't feeding me creatively, and hoping that, like, that one production company would, like, ask me to do something else, and for many people it works many different ways, but for me, I needed to, like, take action on my own, and it actually took getting out of town to do that. I think if I had been in LA, I would have still been waiting for someone to give me their money. Granted, I crowdfunded, so, like, many people gave me their money, but anyways, I would try to, like, give a little bit of hope, and also, like, reality to that. Like, it is difficult, but if you're committed to kind of, like, being outside of the system, I think I haven't encountered anyone who's, like, treated me with, like, disrespect from that choice. I think people have been like, right on, like, live in fucking Portland, and people in LA have been, like, very accommodating and, like, trying to make it work when I come to LA, like, valuing my time and on and on. So I'm, like, team, like, get the fuck out of LA if you don't want to be there. If you want to be in LA, I mean, and I also, like, barely have a career, but I'm, like, committed to making it work. And, like,
I think there's also probably, you'd mentioned you don't really want to have a career as a television writer, at least at this point, which probably makes the decision to not live in LA a little bit easier. Leah, what are you thinking about that? As far as, is it easier to make connections if you live in LA? What's the deal?
Well, I'm a rare bird, and I love LA. It took me a long time, but I love LA, and I'm from snowy, gray Akron, Ohio. So it was when I came here, it was like the lights got turned on, so it's always been and still is a magical place to me. So I feel I get a lot of inspiration from Los Angeles. But if I didn't, I'd be the first one to leave. Like, if I didn't feel inspired here, I think the most important thing you got nothing if you're not inspired. Like, you've got nothing. It doesn't matter how many meetings you're going on. It doesn't matter what you're writing. If you're not feeling inspired and alive, then, you know, you've got to go where you feel that way. So for me, that is Los Angeles. And I think as far as getting your foot in the door in television and, you know, especially staffing and stuff like that, I would think it would be very important to probably be in Los Angeles or New York. But if that's not what you want, also fuck it. I think that, you know, there's probably pros and cons of it. You're going to be around a lot more people in the industry, which is great and terrible. I think it's really, for me, Los Angeles, I started to feel more or two when I made my world feel smaller here, because it can feel so overwhelming at times, and everybody here is doing it. And a lot of times I leave Los Angeles a lot too, even if it's just around California or getting out in nature or whatever, because you know, something that I envy, Sarah, of you living in Portland, is there's stories all around you that aren't about Hollywood. You know, how amazing you can get inspiration that isn't about that. But I do think probably, you know, if you want to get into television, I think it was probably pretty important for you to be in Los Angeles or New York. If you want to make your movie, do that where you can. If it's Louisiana, if it's Hawaii, if it's here, if it's New York, you can make a movie anywhere. So yeah, but television wise, you probably have to be here.
Todd, how about you?
Yeah, no, I love it here too. I'm from New Orleans. I'm from Louisiana. I'm from New Orleans, and like I love it here now because I love, like, it took some getting used to, but it is like a company town in a way, and like all of my friends work in some capacity, whether they're a second day C or a makeup person. To me, like, I'll meet someone at a party and they're a doctor, and I'm like, what? Like a real like career? What? But I have a lot of friends who are feature writers who don't live here. And they just like, you know what? I had a child. I wanted to buy a house that was less than $1 million. And so they moved to rural Tennessee. And it's more work and it's hard, but also it's the trade-off of half of your day is spent not working in the industry or working on scripts. And I want to spend that time like walking through a field with my kid who's at the school. And so they figure it out, and that I have several friends who are feature writers who no one knows they don't live here. Like, they just schedule all of their meetings at least a week in advance, and then they'll hop on a Southwest flight and they'll come for a couple days and just stack all of their meetings. And if they have a spec script go out, they'll just come out for a week and stay at a budget motel and do all their meetings, and then they'll go back, and then they'll make it work, and like totally works for them. And there's ways you can work around it. And I agree with what you're saying is I've been here so long now, I forget what it's like to not just be talking about movies all the time. And every now and then it's nice to get out of town and have real life experiences again. So it's a give and take. And it's just like, you have to work harder or work differently, but it's totally possible. But this is for features. For television, you're right. I think if you want to get staffed on a TV show, like, you have to live within driving distance of the writing room because it's a different beast.
Mm-hmm. You know, you've talked a couple times, and I certainly read about, you know, missing going out to movie theaters and things like that. One question that a lot of people responded to when we were posting about this was, how are you guys incorporating, if you are, the current pandemic into your writing? Are you ignoring it for now? How do you think people should be approaching it? Todd, what are you doing?
I'm totally ignoring it. I think no one's going to want to talk about this shit like in a year. Like, I think we're going to need 5 years to not talk about this. I also think there's probably going to be so many people doing quarantine projects
that look like this.
Yeah. that like, I really think we're not going to we're just going to like want to go back to normal movies for a while. And then maybe in like 10 years, someone will write the great romantic comedy set during the quarantine. But like, I don't know. I just think it's like I was working on this romantic comedy set during the Russian election interference. It was about like a guy who works for a voting machine company, and my manager was like, I don't think anyone wants to read that right now. Like, I think people are like looking to think about other things, not the fact that our election was interfered with by the Russians. And I'm like, yeah, I guess you're right. That's a good point. So I don't know. That's my philosophy, but other people may feel differently.
Sarah, what about you? Or do you think we need to start incorporating social distancing into our scripts, or how are you doing it?
I think you can. I don't know. Yeah, I'm curious what the like appetite will or won't be, because I've talked to friends who are like thinking that people will want that. There's a large part of me that agrees with you, Todd, that we don't. I'm not incorporating it into anything. One thing that I am like excited, the word excited feels like inappropriate, but I'm going to use it and like know that there's context, but I'm excited for like, I guess the opportunity to potentially in the future, like have a different, kind of like base level like world that we're talking about. Like perhaps it will be a bit easier in certain scripts to talk about the like brokenness of the system, and like there'll be more like a widespread understanding of that. I think this time has, you know, opened up a lot of people's minds and eyes to what a lot of other people deal with. So there's a part of me that's kind of like got something working in my head about like something that takes place post this, where it's not discussed, but it's like it's a slightly different reality, not like socially distanced, but just like we're acknowledging like the shit, and it's not like, wait, what are you talking about? Like it's we all know what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Leah? How are you approaching the pandemic in your writing?
Well, I still have trouble incorporating cell phones into scripts. So like I'm kind of good at ignoring things that I don't think are, I think for me personally, I think it needs perspective. I mean, of course, like if you're on a show and it takes place in current times, and you know, I think that for me, it's just, I think there's a lot of, I get sensitive about the whole thing if I think about it too much, which I often do, and people are dying, and I think that it's I think we need perspective. I think that to really take in, you know, when you're going through something, you're either I think totally blocking it out, or even over analyzing. And I think having distance, the same way that we've all talked about doing with our scripts, of like needing to step away for a while so that we can see it straight. I think that that could be helpful for a lot of people. But and also, though, this whole experience has brought up a lot of thoughts and a lot of shit. And I think the way that we deal with that a lot of times as writers, to explore it through our writing. So I think that there's a lot of different ways to do that. I'll be curious about the things that work with that, but I'm not a huge fan of the quarantine rom-com scripts right now.
So we're pretty close to the end here. Those of you who listen to the podcast would know what my last question usually is. Leah, you've been on the podcast, so I'm going to save you for last to give you a chance to think of a new answer. Is there something over the course of your career, or some things that you've learned that you know, wish you could go back to that person who's just starting out and tell them? Todd, I'll leave it to you first.
I mean, I think it might. I think I always had this thought that the script that you write is the movie. You know, because here's the thing. When I was in high school, I would go to the bookstore and I would buy the script for like Pulp Fiction or something. And you would watch the movie and you're like, oh, this is what's on the page. Like, this is that. And then you find out later that they just kind of, that was the shooting script that they then altered to match the movie. But the first thing that you write is like in no way going to resemble the movie. So like if you took a first draft of a movie that I ended up making, you'd be like, wow, there's so much different. And understanding that it's organically going to grow, not just through the writing process from your first draft to the shooting draft. Even when you make a movie, like during the shooting, it's going to change because of things that come up, or actors or whatever. And then in post-production, it's going to change. And you might rearrange your entire movie in editing, and just understanding how the process works from the very beginning to the very end. And I wish I'd had a better concept of that, because I just thought like, oh, you write something and they shoot it exactly that way and then you're done. Because I was lied to by these script books at Borders. So I think now I have a better understanding of that. And I wish I knew that when I was 19.
So how painful was that for you, you know, initially when you know, what was the first time you realized that, like where you wrote a script and like you saw the final product and you're like, what the hell?
So the first thing I ever had made was, I wrote a spec script and it was bought by ABC Family. And it was like it was an R-rated, like Scrooged-esque Christmas movie. And ABC Family bought it, and I was like, well, that's weird. And then they paid me to rewrite it to make it PG. And I was like, okay. And then they went and shot it in Canada, and I showed up on set and to watch a scene, and I was like, I don't know what they're shooting. Like, I don't know what this is. And I just saw somebody's sides, and like people had just scribbled over it, and they were just changing it. And I was like, wait, you can do this? Like, I was 23 or 24, and I was like, you can just do this? No one told me. And they're like, dude, the movie's being made. Like, they're just changing stuff as they're shooting. And I was like, but no one has to call me. And they're like, no, dude, like, you're done. Like, you don't even have to be here. And that's when I was like, oh man, this is weird. And that's, you know, that's how it goes sometimes.
Sarah, what about you? Is there something you wish you could go back and tell yourself?
Kind of a mix of exactly what Todd said, that I would tell myself to not be so precious. The first script I wrote, I think it took me 3 years, and it was like 3 painstaking years of like 80 million drafts. The movie never got made. And I was like so determined for like every single word. I think I just consumed so much energy in like this one singular project that like I missed a lot of other opportunities, 3 years worth of material to be continuing to like grow as a writer and learn as a writer. I think I still have that tendency to be precious because like I love words, I love dialogue. It's my instinct to be like, no, they must say this. But I have learned and am learning that the gold lies in openness and in allowing things to be organic. And then the other thing I would say I have learned is that, I can't believe I'm about to say this, Jesus. If there's a will, there's a way. Like, yeah. But I really want to like encourage other writers out there who just don't know where to start or how to start, that if you have belief and if you have a voice that is true to you, like there's a life to it, there's possibility. I'm a big advocator in like working outside the system, whatever that even means. I'm also like really grateful for the system when it benefits me, but I guess I've learned that you can carve out your own little space, and even if you're sure that no one is going to care about that, I think if you persist at making that space as unique and personal and honest to you as possible, somebody will take notice, or you know, it will have a life in some way.
I think that's really inspiring. Leah, final thoughts?
Okay, so I don't remember if this is what I said on the podcast, so maybe I'm repeating myself, but it's still the same thing. That sometimes what people say is your greatest weakness is actually your strength, and it's your ticket in. If, you know, at the beginning, I think a lot of times people tend to have an adverse reaction to something that feels either outside the system a little bit, or like something they haven't read. You know, if you're, I used to always, and this was pre-Me Too and all this shit, but I used to always get the note, you know, your female characters, they're not likable, save the fucking cat. And meanwhile, like I had 2 scripts where literally the lead character killed a cat, you know, like specifically just to kind of shake it up. But I like killing, and not in my scripts. But I'd always get the notes about my lead characters are usually female, and that they are unlikable and wretched and trashy and XYZ. And that's kind of what I'm known for now. You know, that's what I do now. That's my thing. And I think a lot of times, you know, if somebody's telling you, oh, your scripts feel like they don't really take place, is this a real world or not? I'm confused. That might be your thing, you know? So don't get discouraged by, and it's not to bag on anyone giving you those notes, but sometimes lean into what people are picking on you for, because that might be the thing that makes you stand out and the thing that makes you specific. And if you keep going back to that, if that's the world you want to live in, live there. And then on a more practical level, as far as man, I still need to learn this, to be honest, but when you're getting notes, especially if it's from a producer, a studio, or a network, let them give you the notes. Thank you very much. Oh my goodness, thank you so much. Hang up the phone, then scream into the pillow and go punch something. Don't do that on the phone. So I'm still learning that one.
That's a
Mute
good
the
practice.
phone, take it in, deal with it after. But yeah, just don't be so combative, because everybody needs to be heard, and they might be, like we were talking about earlier, just saying this area of the script doesn't feel right, and just get off the phone.
Don't be an asshole. I think that's a good note to end on.
Yeah.
I want to thank all of you guys for your time. Thank you to everybody who watched. Sorry that we couldn't get to all of your questions, but I hope you found this somewhat educational. Stay safe and healthy out there, and hopefully we'll do this again sometime soon in person.